you're the one that ran into me at high speed, way more negligent than I ever could be by not wearing my seatbelt, because I have some level of contribution to my injury, I could not sue. It's under Old English law. Basically, the judge would throw it out. And the judge would say, well, you should have been wearing your seatbelt, Hasbrook. I'm sorry you were hurt that bad, but the law says if you're even a little bit at fault, you get nothing. So that's the old rule, because it's really unfair if you think about it. So it's sort of an either-or thing. You're either not at fault at all, in which case you get all of your money, or even if you're a little bit, even 1% at fault, you get nothing. That's called contributory negligence. So now if I'm the lawyer for the person that was driving this car, if we're in a contributory fault jurisdiction, that's what I'm going to be arguing. I'm not going to argue, oh, my client wasn't at fault at all, because I'll lose that one. But if I can show that the person that was hurt even just a little bit, then my client would win the whole thing. So that's the contributory fault standard. Now, the more modern rule, and I'm not aware of any state anymore that follows contributory fault. I really haven't researched it either, but because it's such a harsh outcome. So this is a rule we follow nowadays. Comparative fault. And this is where essentially the jury will decide, was there a breach of duty, and was there causation, and then the jury will assign percentages of fault to each side. And then the amount of money that you would receive will be reduced by your own fault. That makes sense, right? So if I'm 15% at fault for not wearing my seatbelt, and the other driver is 85% at fault, then basically, let's say I have $100 of damages, then you reduce it down by my own fault, and then the other driver would pay me $85. That makes perfect sense. So that's what we call comparative fault. So basically you're arguing percentages. Now, that's what happens most of the time in the real world nowadays, is the lawyers end up, as part of the settlement negotiations, arguing over these percentages. And on a small, if it's like a $5,000 case, it's not that big a deal. But when you're talking maybe a multi-million-dollar case, like if I have a broken neck, it's going to be a multi-million-dollar case. 1 or 2 percentage points is a lot of money. So that's where you get into the arguing over percentages, not so much breach of duty. I actually had that case once where it was a little bit different. The person here was a 24-year-old welder. Did maritime weld. This was up in the Seattle area. Made a lot of money as a commercial maritime welder on big ships and stuff. Was on lunch break eating their sandwich out in their car on the road, just parked there, listening to radio, eating a sandwich. And my client was a trucking company, and their truck driver didn't notice him and ran into the car with a semi-truck going about 40 miles an hour. And boom, he went right out the windshield, broke his neck, he's quadriplegic now. It was a very sad case, yeah. And our truck driver was totally at fault. I mean, that was not a fun case for anybody. Okay. Next we have letter C, assumption of the risk. This is the idea that if you get hurt and you're engaged in an activity, typically a sporting or recreational type activity like skiing or snowboarding or bungee cord jumping or scuba diving or horseback riding, that you, as you're engaged in that activity, you are assuming that there are risks involved in that activity. And therefore, if you get hurt as a result of those inherent risks, that is a defense. So like Mount Bachelor or Mount Hood Meadows ski resorts, you go out there skiing and you twist your leg and you blow out your knee. That's an inherent risk of skiing. And therefore, if you sued, they would say, that's normal skiing. That's just an inherent risk which you assumed. In other words, you agreed to it by engaging in that activity. This can also apply if you're a spectator. So if I'm at a basketball game or a baseball or softball or whatever, golf tournament, and I get hit by a ball and breaks my tooth or something, that is an inherent risk of being a spectator and that type of thing. Now, this does not apply to a non-inherent risk. What I mean by that is, let's say I'm skiing and I'm going up on the chairlift, and they didn't grease up the wheels on the chairlift pole where the cable goes over, the little wheels, and as a result of that it creates friction and the cable snaps. And all the chairs fall to the ground and my legs get broken. I'm sitting in the chair and boom, go to the ground. That's bad maintenance. That is not an inherent risk of skiing. And so that would not be an excuse. Now here's where it gets kind of interesting. Now that we have all like the snow parks with all the jumps and the rails, stuff, primarily freestyle type skiing or snowboarding, those are man-made creations. They're not normal snowfall. And so there have been a number of cases now where, maybe the lip on the snowboard tube back and forth is not quite at the right angle. Now you're getting into a standard of care issue on how you build those snow park features. Kind of an interesting thing. So assumption of the risk is the idea that you engage in an activity, and if you are hurt as an inherent risk, you're precluded from suing, essentially. That goes along with this letter E. That's a liability release. That's a form you sign saying if you get hurt, you won't sue, or it may be built into like the ticket, like your lift ticket. If you ever looked at a lift ticket on the back, they've got all that fine print, and that's what it says. That you agree if you get hurt, you won't sue. And the courts will uphold those to a degree. All right, finally, last clear chance, and that is the idea that you had the ability to avoid the whole situation that led to your injury, and even though you weren't at fault for it, you could have done something to either not have it happen or to make it less bad. So for example, let's say I'm in a crosswalk. I'm a pedestrian, and I'm walking across the road, and I see you coming down the road going 80 miles an hour, and I freeze up, and you run me over. Now, you're at fault, clearly. But I could have jumped out of the way, and the average reasonable person would have done that. So you can make the argument that I was partially at fault for not reacting and jumping out of the way. It's kind of not a very good argument for you, but you might get you a percentage point or two, that kind of thing. And then finally we have insurance, and at the end of the day, this is why you have insurance. When you're driving in your business, you're going to have liability insurance in case somebody slips and falls, or gets hurt on your premises, or gets hurt as a result of an employee that did something wrong. That's why you have insurance. Okay, so that's really kind of the primary line of defense. So, we're about out of time here, so again, for a recap, midterm-wise, what are the four elements? They all must link together. And we're going to break there for today. Next week, we will finish up on the tort by talking about strict liability. And then in terms of the midterm, the midterm will be up through strict liability, which we'll get into next week. Now, the midterm, you don't have to take it right away. You can do it anytime during the term. I would recommend that you don't take the midterm, number one, until you've got through chapter 6, I think it is, which is tort law in the textbook and on MindTap. But if you want to take it, you can. It is open right now on campus. And if you have any other questions about it, just send me an email. But it's not due until the end of the term. All right, that's it for today.